record the sessions, and you are able to talk to us by just raising your hand, as we talked about last week or last session. Raise your hand and we will find you and unmute you, and you can have a chat to us if you want. Otherwise, please do continue to type things into the chat or the Q&A, and Kathy will be having a look at those as I run you through a few slides and a few exercises. But this one certainly has got a number of points where I'll be getting input from you, and the best way for that is through the chat function to type it in. At the end of this session, we're going to give you a very short assignment to do between now and the next session. I think you'll find it fairly easy and fairly quick, but it's just a little bit extra stuff to do. There's also going to be another quiz at the end of this one. Yeah, type any questions you've got in as we go. Otherwise, I'm going to get started with just a couple of slides before a little exercise to warm us up. So this module is all about delving into some of the details around the kinetic energy of different crash types at intersections. So we touched on that in the previous module, but I'm going to delve into that in a bit more detail. Characteristics of intersections that align highly with safe system principles, and I suppose by default from that, things that don't align as highly with safe system principles. And characteristics of mid-block sections that align highly with safe system principles. So a mid-block being just any point between intersections, and that can be for all different road users. But we will, this session, probably have a little bit more focus on passenger vehicles, because the next module is very focused on pedestrians and cyclists and motorcyclists. Now, don't forget to count your wallies as we go, because that'll be another trivia question when we get to that. I've got this little graph that I'll bring up in a second, or Venn diagram, but I might actually just ask the group a question now, and just type into the chat or the Q&A a yes if actually. So the question I'm going to ask is, have you attended the Safe System Engineering Workshop in New Zealand? And if you write yes, give me an approximation of how long ago it was that you did it. I don't need to know exactly. Like, I just want to know, you know, was it a year ago, or was it 10 years ago, or the like? So just pop in a yes or a no, and it's just going to give me an idea of how. Yes, every year. Well done, Michael. That's excellent. And no doubt you're a presenter there, I assume. Yeah. Okay. Okay. This is good. We've got a mix. I'm seeing some people who have attended and been participants. I've got some people who have not, and some that had been booked in, but the COVID has stopped them actually having it. That's a challenge. A few that have been there, and it looks like a few that are very active in that workshop in terms of presenters and mentors and the like. So that's good, and I suppose it's an indication that a lot of this group have some you know, wonderful experience in safe system and engineering, road safety and the like. And some of you, no doubt, are very keenly looking forward to it. The reason I ask that is because that course has a number of things in there that overlap a little bit with safe system assessments. And I know that in recent years, safe system assessments are sort of something that I touched on, and there's a little bit of an exercise to start going through a safe system assessment. And there's a lot of discussion in there about road safety auditing. So and how to do road safety audits and the like. And road safety audits are something that have been around for quite a long time. That independent look at any bit of infrastructure, how it interacts with the road network and the road users, and does it present any hazards, or can it be done in a safer manner? So that for a very long time has been our independent road safety check of a project, and trying to inject road safety in there. We also have a process of design review. And by this, I mean that good practice really is for any road design that it's independently reviewed, independently slightly different meaning in terms of road safety audit to sort of what I would call design review. But somebody else does that checks you've got your calculations right, checks all the standards were met, and goes sort of through and does that sense check. But that's very much just from an absolute standards perspective. Are we meeting all those requirements? Is there enough capacity in any drainage facilities and those sorts of things? There's a bit of that sort of stuff in road safety audit, but as many of you who have been to that safe system engineering workshop know, the road safety audit should be looking beyond standards and guidelines and taking that sort of genuine look at what's happening and seeing if there's anything else there. A safe system assessment has extra elements to it, but it certainly does have that big overlap between road safety audits and safe system assessments. And then there's a little bit of the sort of design review stuff in there as well. Out here, we've got a variety of different things that are in a safe system assessment and that aren't really covered in road safety audit. Some of it's to do with the way things are presented and the quantification of different things, the way it's broken up with the matrix, the qualitative questions about other elements of the safe system, that whole, holistic system mix thinking as well. But I'll talk to you about this in the last module we have in more detail, because I think it's good for us to get our mind in the space of how these things are slightly different but very complementary and have some overlapping elements. Safety and design is another thing, and that's really looking at, can it be built safely, can it be decommissioned safely, whatever's being planned in terms of the infrastructure, can it operate and be maintained safely. So there's a little bit in some of these, and there's some other stuff in there. And DDA audit or so that's what a number of jurisdictions in Australia would call it, a Disability Discrimination Act audit. I'm not sure exactly what New Zealand terms these things, but that's the check that whatever's being built out there can be accessed by all road users, including people in wheelchairs or with vision impairment or anything like that. And you do a little bit of that in a road safety audit if you pick up things here and there, but it's a different exercise. I wouldn't say there's too much of that in a safe system assessment. But I do that to sort of contextualize safe system assessments. A very common thing that we will hear from projects is we do a road safety audit, we don't need a safe system assessment. And these extra bits can aid a project in the early stages to get more safe system thinking and inject it into the project. And I always say that road safety audits are a very important part of a design or the life cycle of any project. Best to start with a safe system assessment and then do road safety audits through its life cycle. But anyway, we'll get to that again later down the track. But I said earlier, we're going to start with intersections, and I'm just going to show you a couple of bits of information and then get you to do a little exercise for me. Now, I've taken these very sort of basic principles of intersection design to get higher alignment with safe system principles from some work out of Monash University Accident Research Centre which was a while back when they did this, but I think the principles still very much apply. Ideally, we would be getting less vehicles through the intersection, and that would certainly give us better alignment with safe system principles. Also, likewise, if we could get fewer intersections. Now, this can often be hard, but it's something to be thinking about early on. So in the sort of safe system assessment way of thinking, both of those influence the exposure to crashes. Fewer conflict points per intersection is really one of the things in a safe system assessment that we term likelihood. We see that as a likelihood factor. Now, a lot of people in, I suppose, the way we've been doing road safety assessments and investigations in the past will be very tempted to push that into an exposure factor. Now, there's a good argument for that, and it was just decided in a number of jurisdictions that for a safe system assessment itself, that the number of conflict points would be seen as likelihood. And the exposure is just the number of vehicles that are moving through that, or number of pedestrians that are crossing, or the number of cyclists that are going through there, or motorcyclists. So the exposure is the number of road users exposed to that crash. The likelihood is things like the conflict point, and then all those factors that may influence whether or not a crash happens. And then we have the speed and the impact angle. And certainly for passenger vehicles, the impact angle is quite an important aspect of the severity outcome we would expect. But to give us sort of what we term this high alignment with safe system principles, we would want any 90-degree crashes between passenger vehicles to be less than 50 kilometers per hour, which we showed you on that graph as to why 50 kilometers per hour was chosen at that exponential kick-up point. Where angle and speed can't be, can be somewhat altered, we can go somewhere between 50 and 70. And that's sort of back to your old vectors theory where, you know, you've got a crash happening like that and the energy gets pushed out. So you've got two cars crash. Well, we know they sort of bounce off each other a bit. So that's how you do that. And if you skew it back the other way and they crash more head on, we know there's high energy there, but the crumple zones, the airbags, the seat belts are all coming better into play. And so we can go up between 50 and sort of 70 on some of those crashes between passenger vehicles. 70 would be very sort of higher end for those sorts of things. For conflicts between unprotected road users, so pedestrian cyclists, we're looking for below 30 kilometers per hour, or trying to alter things so they can't, those crashes can't happen. And where the above speed and angle combinations cannot be met, crash risk must be reduced to a negligible level. Very broad statement, but it's sort of acknowledging that we can try to work on some other ways to try to address these things. I'm going to go into that into more detail and happy to pass on these Monash University intersection reports, which are available online anyway if anybody's interested. Here's a little bit more detail on this. So we're talking sort of, this is passenger vehicle only. Sort of the 40, we're pretty happy with most crash types, and that 90-degree around for that right angle crash. Using ChemX, so the kinetic energy management model, which is it's a model that basically looks at the angle, the speed, types of vehicles, and gives you an indication of the forces that will be present in those crash types. you know, that you would never, I suppose, well, I shouldn't say never. It would be highly unlikely that you would ever need to use a model like this in doing a safe system assessment. The reason for that is a safe system assessment is a fairly broad brush tool to give you an indication of where risk lies or where things don't align with safe system principles. But from these models, we know that sort of 60km/h mark is about it with the these different angles, and that 70km/h for that head-on. Rear end's one that hadn't got too much coverage in terms of thinking about energy and the like. Yeah, there's some interesting, so I suppose more newer research, and I think Michael was going to share some of that with people about different crash types and the like. Rear ends sort of have some severe injury. The fatality isn't as prominent at different speeds, but nonetheless, this is giving you a general indication, and you can always look back to those that sort of heat spectrum that I gave you as a broad brush indication of where things might lie in terms of the severity of crashes. In a safe system assessment, you want to get a general idea of the angle crashes can happen at. You don't need to go to this sort of level of detail. You don't need the designers to come back to you with specific angles on these sorts of things. You can just generally say, oh, that's about a right angle crash. So we're about 90 degrees, or oh, we're definitely going to get some more angle on that. So that's, going to between 90 and 180. So, you can be very, I suppose, general with it for most safe system assessments, because we don't have that, very specific data to spit out of it. And the reality is that crashes happen in such a huge variety of ways out there at intersections and on the road network, that being that precise down to sort of, angles by sort of 1 degree is not needed, and it's not really going to give you a good indication, because we know there'll be different vehicle types involved in this. There'll be all sorts of scenarios of how this actually plays out. But we like to get a general idea. Is this a very harsh angle, or is it a more friendly angle of crash that could happen? The one thing I do always like to remind people about is a secondary crash. Okay, we're talking intersections at the moment and passenger vehicles predominantly. But people are very focused on this initial crash, as they should be, high energy in there. But not always are we getting this crash that happens directly into that. And even if we do, the entity, in being the sort of two vehicles, leaves the road, and secondary crashes quite often happen. And this gets, this can be often where we get a clip off the front of the vehicle, and they go careering off the road, the back of the vehicle. You even get a fair bit of, I suppose, avoidance style crash problems at intersections, where one vehicle pulls out and the other avoids, but leaves the road in that evading maneuver and crashes. And this was some work out of the Centre for Automotive Safety Research in the University of Adelaide, basically plotting secondary crashes at intersections. You can see, so vehicle 1 goes in there and vehicle 2 goes in there, and they crash right at the middle there. And of course, probably research didn't need to be done to tell us that they were going to predominantly crash out these directions. But they certainly were looking at crashes that involved fatal and serious outcomes for the passenger vehicle occupants. And we do often put fixed hazards around intersections for one reason or another. And it's something we need to be aware of. So in a safe system assessment, we categorize things into different crash types, which I'll take you through later. One of those crash types is run-off road. And even when looking at an intersection itself, the runoff road crash risk goes up a bit because you know there's that additional turbulence at the intersection, or the potential for that sort of issue happening, and the secondary crash of vehicles leaving the road. So do refer back to these tables, and I'll keep coming back to those. And when you go out to do a safe system assessment, it's one of the things that's helping you quantify that score between 0 and 4 for the amount of severity you're expecting in the crash that you've predicted. I think a lot of you might find more assistance going to the heat graph or the color spectrum graph that we presented in module 1. So that's a very, very sort of broad theoretical discussion about intersection and the like. I think it's best that you do a little bit of thinking yourself about these principles of the likelihood of crashes, the exposure to crashes, and the severity of crashes. And let's use an actual intersection as our example here. So you're not going to get all the information you want about this intersection, and I'm not even really going to tell you where it is. But you could sort of imagine it's in the sort of growth area maybe of any of the cities or towns that you live in. What we've got here is a major sort of arterial road, 2 lanes in each direction. And it's got a 70 km/h speed limit. So 70 here, just to remind you of that. We've got a side road here, and it's got a 50 km/h default speed limit, 50. Down the road, way back, well, probably about 400 meters down the road, there is a school. This is a shared user path. It's got, you know, for pedestrians and cyclists. This is a drain or culvert. It's a big bit of drainage infrastructure. I don't know where all the water's coming from, but it goes under there and out that way. This is a bus stop. And it's a sort of major bus route. It being a major arterial road, it takes a lot of heavy vehicles. It's got 11% heavy vehicles, commercial vehicles, and it actually takes B doubles, which are the sort of largest common truck in Australia, major freight mover. This is a service road over here, which goes both directions. So it's a multi-directional service road. And it just basically is giving access to the different houses along here. What else can I tell you about this? Up the road about 800 meters is a set of traffic signals. And down the road about another 2 kilometers, another set of traffic signals. There's no really good way to access the school and all these houses except for going in this road. So yeah, I think they're about the main. Oh, the traffic volumes. Of course, you're going to want to know that. The main road has 19,000 vehicles a day, and the side road has 1,200, and most of them are around school time, peak hours, people going out to go to work and the like. So that's a bit of the background of this intersection. I'll show you some photos of it from the ground. So there you go, you can see it from the ground. So that's the bus stop that I was talking about. That's the side road there. You can see vehicles coming this way. It's got a right turn lane in there. It's got some street lighting. I'll look at it from the other direction. There you go. That's that sort of drainage structure thing that I was talking about. and we've got a service road. We'll jump back. Now, what your task is going to be, and I'm going to give you a good sort of maybe 4 minutes, 5 minutes to have a ponder about this, is we want you to alter the road environment and use any other initiatives you want to virtually eliminate death and serious injury at this intersection, or get us as close as you possibly can to eliminating death and serious injury at this intersection. But I'm going to give you some constraints. The first constraint you've got is based off the ability to access the school and the properties and the consultation that's been done. The idea of closing this intersection off, which I know you are thinking about because it's a very highly aligned with safe system principles, is not available to you. You can't do that. So we have to have free access into the intersection and out of the intersection in the general vicinity of this point. So sending people a kilometre up the road to U-turn and the like, again, not acceptable for this scenario. That's the context we've got. So that's context number one. Context number two is that you have to operate in the current political and organisational environment that you are currently in. So if you're proposing something quite radical, I'm also going to be interested in a little bit of a plan for how you'll actually get that approved and funded and on the ground. So have a think about that as well. And the third one is I'm going to give you a budget to upgrade this. And I'm going to give you $2.7 million. 2.7 million New Zealand dollars. Now, if you have no idea what that will buy you in terms of infrastructure, don't worry. I'm here to cost estimate anything you come up with. So all you need to do is ask through the chat, or if you wanted to put your hand up, pop in. I want to, build a major, flyover. So we're going to have this road go over the top of this road, and we're going to have some interchange ramps. And I'd say, yep, okay, that's going to cost you $28.2 million. But you can come up with anything and I will cost estimate it. Or you can cost estimate it yourself, and you can be, broad brush. I think that will get you enough to do some pretty significant things in this intersection of vicinity. Okay, Kathy, I'm going to pause there, and you can tell me if anybody's got any immediate questions about the task or the intersection itself.
I don't like the budget, Ken.
They don't like the budget. Yep. No variations being offered either. I'm sorry. Tough. COVID, we've diverted funds to other areas. Just the 2.7.
I think people should test out our cost estimator over here.
Oh,
I didn't know you did this, Ken.
Yeah.
No, New Zealand dollars. Yep, not Australian, not 2.7 million Australian dollars. It's got to be New Zealand dollars.
There's a question in there, can we alter the speed limit? Sure. If you go very extreme on that, I'm going to need you to justify it or sell it to your community and your politicians and the like, but nothing is off the table. So when you've come up with a few ideas, what we're going to get you to do is type them into the chat. But I don't want you just typing flyover or grade separation. And I want you to write in what the thing is that you're planning and whether it impacts on the exposure, the likelihood, or the severity. We've got a question in there on the cost of a roundabout. Well, a roundabout, a full-size roundabout to meet the design guidance, the Austroads guide, and local requirements is going to cost you $4.9 million. And that's because you've got to acquire some land, you've got to take some people's houses, you've got some services running along there you've got to move, and a few other things. So you're out of your budget for that full-size roundabout. Got some good commentary going on the side, asking for approvals for smaller roundabouts. Well, sure, we can have a chat about that and what the implications may be, and how small you'd need to go to get it within your 2.7 and how that might operate. We'll talk all about that if that's what anybody puts forward. So remember, whatever you come up with is, I'll answer that in a second. Well, I want to know the exposure, the likelihood, or the severity. So if you say, I'm going to increase the line marking, enhanced line marking, that would be a likelihood factor. So you go enhanced line marking dash likelihood. And so the question is, how tall is the storm water culvert and how often does it flood? Good question. It's actually quite short, definitely shorter than humans. So it's about a metre and it's quite wide. And how often does it flood? I'm not sure. I can't tell you that. It's quite a bit of infrastructure, so I would assume that it's there for a reason. But I do like where Tim's mind's going there in asking some of these questions. And then Richard's said it only floods during school times, which is quite good. Okay, we're starting to get a few answers and ideas coming in, and you can do it to all panelists or all panelists and attendees, but exactly as people are doing there, which is really good, talking about the exposure, the likelihood and the severity being connected to anything that they're putting in there. No ability to close the road. Thank you for clarifying that. No, we've said it must maintain that access in and out in both directions.
What about during works, Ken?
Yep. During works, we can close things off. That's okay. Cost of raising the entire intersection there. So the entire intersection raised for 600,000. Got a good deal there. Sorry, I've given a price and somebody now wants two of them at that price. That's very good. Yeah. So pop in your ideas, and if I want to know lots of things or ideas and whether they influence exposure, likelihood, or severity. Okay, so question in there, I'm not sure whether it's for us or for the others within the group. Does council allow platforms on arterials? So I suppose, I don't know who manages I assume that Wakataki manages the arterials in New Zealand and makes those sorts of decisions alongside council, no doubt. But as I say, it's operating in your environment. So if that's not a common thing that would be done on a road with 19,000 vehicles a day, bus route and heavy vehicles, some justification how that might play out. Is there a detour route, for example? I suppose that's for during construction. There we can move people around, but not in a permanent sense. Okay, this is awesome. We are getting some great answers in. I'm going to start just having a chat about a few of the answers that have come in, and then I'm going to use this to sort of carry the discussion on with a few other slides. Okay, so we've got some people who are, I'm just going to go back and see where we're at. So variable speed zone for the entire intersection or for that area, and a raised platform, and pointing out, I suppose there the comment was reduces exposure, likelihood and severity. I would actually say that that just addresses the likelihood and severity. So lowering the speed through this intersection doesn't influence the number of vehicles going through there, unless like you had some traffic modeling that showed that because you lowered it, they might use another route in a significant sort of shift in their travel patterns, but that's pretty unlikely. So exposure really would have to influence the number of vehicles entering, exiting, or moving through there, or the number of pedestrians crossing, or like crossing at the point that they could be struck. So then we had some really great discussion around platforms and whether council or Wakatahi would accept that, and whether that's something politically palatable. I might come back to that. I think is a really good discussion to be had. We've got there, so reducing the speed limit to 60 on the main road and 40 on the side road. And no commentary there on that exposure, likelihood or severity, so chuck that in. So slip lane left out to reduce the consequence. Okay, so that would reduce the consequence of any crash by improving the angle of crash out there if you added some sort of slip lane out. I think it may have some challenges in terms of increasing the likelihood of some crashes, and certainly depending on the angles that that come in. But I can absolutely agree that the angle of that crash is going to be slightly more favourable in terms of just a physics. Okay, raised platform for severity, very good, thank you. Yeah, so if we have a raised platform, we're going to slow vehicles down, thus when they crash, the severity will be less. So raised signalised intersection to reduce the severity. Again, yes, we talked about that. Actually signalising it now brings a lot more likelihood reduction into that. So we know that signals are a great likelihood reducer. Certainly the likelihood of crashes significantly goes down. Signals by themselves, we're worried always about that red light runner at speed, and the raised platform or any other way to slow vehicles down through there also reduces the severity there. So that one sort of came through from a number of people, and yeah, so there's a lot of sort of, I suppose, interest in that. Some people wanting to try to get a little bit of lower speeds in terms of doing that other ways with speed limit reductions. with a signalised intersection. And that addressing the speed limit reduction seen to address the likelihood of crashes, and the severity, and the signals doing a lot of the likelihood as well. Oh, wow, this is awesome. There's a lot of great answers in here, and I'm going to have to move through them a bit quicker. So, some ideas of utilising the drainage structure for pedestrians, if we could maybe get it a little bit deeper, and that influencing the exposure to pedestrian crashes. And that is correct. That actually, as an idea, a lot of people get very uncomfortable with the idea of utilising a drainage structure for pedestrian access. I love doing it, and I've got lots of examples of where we've done it. Not quite like this one, but certainly when we've built all of that infrastructure, if you've got the space and the length of it isn't too bad in terms of the fear that people will be mugged or the like in there. Why not use that? And people will say, well, what if it's flooded? And our answer to that is, if it's flooded, people won't use it. Now, that's a simplistic answer, but I think it's a really good way to eliminate the exposure of a pedestrian crossing here if we could put them under. Unfortunately, in this one, as I said, it's a bit small for that to actually happen. But I will sort of show you some examples, maybe next week, of some areas where this has easily been done alongside sort of different drainage structures. Now, here's one that is a little bit out of left field, and I like out of left field. Move freight onto rail. And that would reduce the severity of crashes because the heaviest vehicles are not using that intersection. It might also alter the exposure if we can change the vehicle numbers by a significant amount. But that's good. Now we're thinking out of the box. I didn't limit you at all to only pouring concrete. So well done there. Now, the practical, like in a infrastructure project itself, obviously that's a bit beyond it, but I didn't limit you particularly to those things in this little exercise. Speed limit reductions with camera enforcement and reducing the likelihood and severity of crashes, and that's generally correct. Wow. Okay, this is good. I must say, just a wonderful set of things that came in and discussion and the like. I'm going to move on and keep talking about this intersection and referring back to some of the other things that have been popped up. But thank you so much for that input. Very interesting. So let's move forward a little bit. We did see there that a lot of people were asking about traffic signals. Now, I mentioned there were signals up the road, there were signals down the road, and signals we know are going to be cheaper. So we don't need to, necessarily acquire land to put in the signals. We don't need the massive expanse of sort of civil infrastructure works that a roundabout would require. And as I talked about, and you'll see me use this little box down here quite a bit to indicate what we're actually addressing in terms of the exposure, the likelihood or severity. And this one is all about the likelihood of crashes. Now take note of this and what I'm talking about, because a little tip for you, your assignment is all about categorizing things into exposure, likelihood or severity. So signals reduce the likelihood of crashes. Some people are tempted to say that it changes the exposure to crashes because we've got a red light, which means that they're not exposed to that crash. Well, that thinking, I suppose, is not quite how we go about thinking in a safe system perspective because of that human fallibility. The fact that we know humans will run the red light, a lot less of them will run the red light, than sort of be exposed to crashes when it's a give way sign by itself. but nonetheless, we know it's still there, so it's the likelihood that reduces. We know the presence of a fully controlled right turn, a red arrow, is a really good likelihood reducer, but we know severity of crashes at intersections is still very high. But there's this little issue we've got, and I grabbed this heat map off our system of fatal and serious injury crashes over a 10-year period. And I used outer metropolitan Melbourne, but I could have done this for outer metropolitan Auckland or Hamilton or, you know, pretty much any city out there. And these hotspots of death and serious injury are all at signalised intersections, large signalised intersections. And in fact, I dare say if you run your crash data for the country or the city that you're in, you'll find large signalised intersections being your dominant source of death and serious injury in terms of intersection crashes. It's pretty consistent across Australia, New Zealand, and quite a few other countries. The reason is that you've got the volume, so you've got a lot of exposure to crashes. You've got speed in these outer areas, and you've got the fact that the speeds are maintained high through these intersections, and people run these red lights. So Jeremy Woolley, who's from CASA, the Centre for Automotive Safety Research, Professor Jeremy Woolley, he made a statement that when he was doing the Australian the review into the road trauma in Australia, which was recently released, and he said that traffic signals are the biggest failure of traffic engineers. I was like, wow, that is a controversial statement and will make a lot of people angry. But he says it from the perspective of us sort of feeling that a set of traffic signals has solved all of our problems. And that, you know, if we really want to fix an intersection, we signalize the whole thing. And that's very, I suppose, much driven by understanding that we're going to reduce the likelihood of crashes and also having the ability to get more flow, throughput, and the like. And of course, sometime in the distant future, grade separating a flyover will be the absolute ultimate, but that's, you know, 20 years away. So we've done the best we can. Well, he's really challenging that, and rightly so when you look at the amount of trauma we see at large signalised intersections. And we know roundabouts work better, and this is, to a group like this is nothing revolutionary. We know roundabouts work a whole lot better in terms of reducing the severity of crashes. People approach a roundabout, slow down, better angles of crashes. And really we're influencing the severity of crashes with roundabouts. The numbers, the pure numbers of crashes at roundabouts is somewhat similar to earlier intersection forms. They're just altered. They're rear ends, they're side swipes, they're minor crashes, but generally about the same. The severity is just so much lower. But the challenge we have in that intersection we're using as an example is the size it would need to be to get that large vehicle we were talking about around it, to make a turn, to even go through it. We need big expanses of it to get that swept path of the vehicle around this roundabout. But somebody made a very interesting comment there. Could we go a little roundabout? Could we just, you know, chuck a little bit of paint on the road like this one in the UK? And, you know, that's sort of laughable for the road that we were talking about. But the principles are not too bad, in my opinion. The reason I say it's laughable for that other intersection is that there's no deflection, there's nothing there to, you know, physically slow people down and the like. And we would have a lot of operational challenges and the like with that. But one big advantage you get of these little things in some road environments is that no road user approaching this intersection, in terms of passenger vehicles or motorcyclists, believe they have ultimate priority. So if it's a set of traffic signals and there's a green light, of course, the road user approaching that believes they have ultimate priority. I mean, it's a green light. They're going. They don't change their speed. They don't actually concentrate much when they're going through that green light intersection. But if you check the non-prior, like, the roundabout, what it does is it means that everybody approaching slows down and looks around because they might have to give way. And that's a real sort of hidden win of roundabouts, where we're just concentrating on the circle and the deflection and those sorts of things. But that is a big win. I mean, it's kind of the UK's equivalent in this as the American four-way stop. And sort of does a similar thing. Nobody's got priority, so they all come in and slow down and stop and look around. We've had huge wins there in road safety if you can, get that sort of thing happening. And I think, in these sorts of environments, we should be looking a lot more at these sort of very cheap or fairly cheap ways of doing that. I would encourage some four-way stops to be starting to get rolled out, but that's a bigger challenge. Now, people will get worried about the fact that that leg, for example, has no deflection, no change in angle, and they'll once they know they're clear, they'll put the foot down and go quite fast through there, and that's true. You can alter things with some raised platforms on the approach to these if you've got concerns about higher speeds through the roundabout and these sorts of things, so you can start to play around with that and continue to address the severity of crashes. We know roundabouts perform better, less conflict points. So a conflict point, a dot there being a point you can crash. Now, this is just passenger vehicle to passenger vehicle stuff. I haven't included cyclists and pedestrians at this stage. But we know less conflict points, big win. Angle of crash, much more favorable to be crashing like that. Energy dissipated out that way rather than the energy really being pushed straight into that vehicle. And this is my sort of picture to say that people drive in all states of consciousness. Now, we don't want that. We wish they wouldn't. We wish they were all alert and, well rested. But people drive when they're tired. They drive when they've, done a double shift. They drive when they've had a couple of beers. They drive on different medication. We need to work on all of that with the other elements of the system. But what we do know from an infrastructure perspective is putting a massive lump of infrastructure in the middle of the intersection wakes people up, makes them look around and slow down. They come out of whatever sort of dream state they're in because there's something there, and they wake up. And that is just a huge win, that we can wake people out of these states when they are approaching a conflict area like an intersection. Now, what we do know, though, is that the traffic signals themselves do not give that wake-up effect in a lot of cases. And some of you may have this as personal experience and just go and be saying, I remember that time when I went, did I just run through a red light? And you're not really too sure. Also, the one where you've been driving for a few minutes and you cannot for the life of you remember the last 5 minutes of driving, and you've been in some sort of dream state. Well, if you'd approached a roundabout, it would have pulled you out of that, and you would have actually sort of been more alert. So roundabouts are just wonderful, and they've got all those wins, but we talked about the cost of them and the size of them. Also, sort of two-lane roundabouts don't tend to operate from a safety perspective as well. And so we do have capacity challenges with roundabouts as well. So the amount of vehicles you can get through is less. And so you need to start adding lanes, which starts to diminish our safety return a bit. So this is just a graph showing two-lane roundabouts. and it's got speed performance on the side and inner radius of the roundabout. So small radius, 2 lanes are really performing quite badly in terms of the speed vehicles going through. But speed is always a good proxy for death and serious injury. It's pretty much always a good one. And that's sort of, as you get really big, it starts to come back together. Single lane roundabouts, and I've got in here turbo roundabouts in there as another one, and I'll show you what a turbo roundabout is. But a turbo roundabout's a 2-lane roundabout, which, as you can see there, gets speeds down around the 1-lane roundabout and thus our safety performance. So here's a turbo roundabout, for example, and you can see here what it actually has is a raised separator on the approach and raised separator through. So you've got to get in the right lane. And what it does is it stops the fast straight line running through the intersection, and it stops some side swiping and a few other challenges. So there's another example of a turbo roundabout, sort of getting that control. And you can see there's quite a few benefits of these. You get into this lane to turn around to go right, and you go around that way. I love this picture for another reason as well. Look at the beautiful conflict angle that's happening there. So yeah, we've got some sort of something going on, but we know that's going to be low speed, and we know that the angle is really great. So yeah, not ideal, but the outcomes are going to be great. A mistake's been made somewhere there, but everybody's going to be very, very fine as a result of that. And this one I show you for a couple of reasons. It is it's not in Australia or New Zealand, it's actually in the Netherlands, and it is a large turbo roundabout. And it's signalised, so there's signals as well as the turbo roundabout. And I was talking to a Dutch engineer who we brought over to delve into cyclists and roundabouts as an issue. And I popped this roundabout up and said, I just find this fascinating because in Australia, and I dare say New Zealand, this intersection would have got to a point of traffic that we would have said it needs to be ripped out and a set of traffic signals need to be put in there. And the Dutch engineer goes, but what about all the death and serious injury that would occur? And I was like, yeah, I know, but it just gets traded off for this movement of larger number of vehicles. And he says, well, this moves a large number of vehicles. And then we had a bit of a chat about the massive land take that's there and the costs and all those sorts of things. But the idea that a road authority would put in something as dangerous as a high speed, high volume signalized intersection was just he could not comprehend this idea. And that to me really solidified where we've really gone wrong with large signalized intersections. Now, Kathy, I'm just going to pause there. Oh, there's an exciting little intersection to talk about. Actually, I will talk about this just before I take questions or comments. This hasn't actually been built, but what I do like is the concept and the thinking behind it. What this is a existing large signalized intersection, which, every year, a couple of serious injuries, just guaranteed. And we just, every time people look at it, they go, not quite enough to grade separate it, can't justify that. And it's signalized, so we've got fully controlled right turns, we've got speed cameras, red light cameras, nothing else we can do. They should stop running the red lights. And we just, it's been like that for about 15 years. And so people are now sort of saying, well, could we put in sort of the key elements of the roundabout, which would wake people up, slow people down, improve the angles, but still keep some of the capacity elements by having cut-throughs of the roundabout, which is quite innovative. And I think it looks scary from up here, but I think if you're on the ground, it would actually be probably quite acceptable if it was done right. But anyway, design committees a little bit scared to do this one. I think we need a bit more pushing of innovation. And they even mock up little ones in different areas. This one's called the Squircle, I believe, it's a square circle in an urban area which does the same thing. Now, Kathy, I'm going to take any questions. I'm going to actually stop sharing my slides there because there's a little thing that I wanted to just have a look for on my desktop while I take questions.
Thank you, Ken. So there's a comment from Maria just saying earlier when you were talking about signalised intersections that research shows that people don't naturally think or rate intersections as risky, so they aren't on high alert, as you mentioned. Mike says he loves turbos. They're a nice mix of efficiency and safety and smaller. So yeah, some good comments coming in there. And then I think earlier there was some commentary around compact roundabouts. Are you going to talk about those soon?
Yeah, I will. I've got a compact roundabout example coming up, and I think there's wonderful things we can be doing in that space and continue to do. I love the commentary coming through from this group. What a great group.
I wanted to leave that comment out actually, but anyway, never mind.
I just wanted to show you something that I did. So I think I mentioned to all of you, I used to work for the Victorian Road Authority, Vic Roads, for a long time. And was in the road safety department and in other technical design areas and the like. But this was so we had this massive program at Vic Roads, which was a congestion easing program. And it was basically, the program involved ripping roundabouts out because they were, not performing well from a traffic movement perspective, rip them out and replace them with traffic signals that would pump way more traffic through. And you get, the travel time benefits were, a couple of seconds per vehicle and these sorts of things. And they always came out with these really massive BCRs because you can basically say, well, improvements in travel time, you equate to, your average income of a New Zealander or a Victorian or whatever it is, and you multiply that by the number of vehicles that get through and the improvement in time, and you get these massive dollar wins out of it. Now, these started sort of coming across my desk in the road safety department for road safety review. And what they were expecting was the review of, are we using mast arms? Have we got LED lights on these? Which ones should be fully controlled right turns and which ones shouldn't? So I just started sending back these memos, which were, and I kept this memo because, well, partly because of the controversy it caused. But anyway, the memo, and this is the sort of template of the memo. So road safety department, yeah, okay, here we go. So road safety department. The road safety department has analysed this project as increasing crashes as follows. Project life, so 20-year life of the project. Number of deaths attributed to this project, 2.3. Number of serious injuries attributed to this project, 12.6. And I put little people just to remind them these are not just numbers, these are people. And then acceptance, statement of acceptance. The above trauma is accepted by, and I tried to get the regional manager to sign these off. So I never got one signed, and I got some stern talking to by my executive director and some regional directors who said, you don't understand the balance we have to do and the competing demands, and you've oversimplified these things, and managing a road network is a balance between safety and mobility. And the thing is that we need to boil these down to this kind of in-your-face kind of statement, where we remove the BCR out of the equation in that sense. And yes, we might be able to get a little bit of time saving per vehicle, which comes out to a massive dollar amount over 20 years for all those vehicles going through there. But when we're trading off human life and health to do that, and it's not an opinion, I mean, this is based on very clear, easy evidence to gather, it is just unacceptable. And if we're going to go down that track, I said somebody needs to stand up and say, I'm willing to kill this many people. I'm willing to seriously injure this many people to get a better throughput through that intersection. And nobody's willing to do it when you put it that way. that's just a little one. I hope maybe the New Zealanders start doing that. But I do say the New Zealanders are a step ahead in a number of areas. Signalised roundabouts being one, and saying, no, we're not going to rip that roundabout out and signalise it. We're going to signalise the roundabout and try and get way more throughput and life out of this wonderful feature. And that's where a lot of other jurisdictions need to learn there. The UK does a fair bit of that as well. And then we talk. Oh, sorry, Kathy, go.
Sorry, Ken, I'm just wondering, you said you left Vic Roads, or were you asked to leave, I wonder?
Good point. I'm sure there's a couple of people happy that I left, that's for sure. Right, okay, raised safety platforms. So, you know, this is vertical deflection. And these are, I suppose, things that we know we do in like local streets and these areas. But, you know, traditionally, like if I was ever came up with the idea of vertical deflection, raising a major arterial road with 19,000 vehicles and buses and heavy vehicles, I would have been, I don't know, told to sit in the corner and think about what I just said. This back in my early days, and it just wasn't done. But these are different times, and we've started to get an understanding that doing raised platforms or raised intersections on high volume roads is not the end of the world. It can happen, and it can happen quite well. And so this is what actually the region proposed for that intersection you were looking at. And some of you were thinking along very similar lines. You'll notice here that they've done this raised safety platform on the approach. Now, the reason they've done this only on here is that these are the bullet vehicles. These are the ones that do the damage. These vehicles that are turning in and coming out, they're the target vehicles. They are not doing the damage, and thus changing their speed or the like isn't required. So the other one is that you don't need to, you know, make vehicles coming in and out of here, you know, destabilized and the like. And so you can just slow the bullet vehicles down. And they wanted to signalize it because that was what fitted in. That's what was in their cost range. It reduced the likelihood of crashes as well. It helped pedestrians cross as well, but it really, they weren't comfortable with having these high speed through the signalized intersection, so wanted to slow things down to address both the likelihood and the severity of crashes. And so a lot of you proposed that similar stuff and similar thinking. We might, you know, we've still got some pedestrian challenges and some cyclist challenges, and we'll talk a bit more about that next week. This is a very, you know, car-dominated risk area, but and so that one was built on that road, and you can see there that we've got advisory speeds of 50 kilometres per hour, trying to get people down to 50 kilometres per hour going through this intersection. There's another one, and there's lots of advanced warning of it, and the grade of that is far shallower than an urban speed hump, but it is enough to slow vehicles down. And I'm going to give you a fact sheet which talks about the specifics on the grade of these ramps and the different grades you'd use for different speed outcomes you're trying to achieve, because that's all. There's quite a bit of, you know, detail in that. But the principle of this is great, and this, I love this photo because look, this vehicle hitting the brakes with green lights to slow down, to navigate over this. What a wonderful outcome this is in terms of they just slow down to somewhere around the 50, proceed through there, and everything's good. The trucks, the buses, what do? They slow down, they navigate the raised platform, and it's not the end of the world at all. It also has a nice little effect on the people's decision on whether to put the foot down or to brake. So there's a thing called the dilemma zone, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of. And it's basically that time and that point where you are in a dilemma as to, do I put the foot down and go, or do I hit the brakes and stop? And this is sort of, you're in dilemma zone territory here. And the presence of that platform appears to really close up that dilemma zone, because people are just more inclined to hit the brakes, and we know that there's some challenges associated with dilemma zones. And of course, you've got one in your backyard that's recently been built down there in just out the outskirts of Hamilton, and somebody's gonna have to remind me of the actual intersection name. I stood out there with Simon from council for quite a while before it was built. But it's a really good example, and won some awards, and I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with it. But I think great example there that it can be done. And Austroads has just released a document all about raised platforms and how they can be done and where they can be done. And Gordon, yes, Thomas Gordonton. Yeah, that's it, just outside Hamilton. Yeah, so Austroads has released a good document, lots of great information, a lot of the work done by New Zealanders as well. So well done to the New Zealanders involved in that project. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this on major roads. And what I'm very happy to see these days is at least in Victoria, the policy is you rip a roundabout out, you've got to get speeds down to within tolerable levels, and you've got to do a safe system assessment, obviously, and that's reinforcing that. Here's a road with 53,000 vehicles a day on the main run, 20,000 vehicles on the side one. Roundabout was there, way over, like it was saturated, was not performing well. Of course, it was going to get ripped out, but they were forced to put in a raised safety platform with that. I'd like to see the one on the slip lane a bit lower, so 30 on that, but anyway, and a bit sharper on that. But nonetheless, I mean, massive volumes, but slowing people through that intersection. Great win. There's the road design note, 0307. Of course, it's a specific Victorian road design note, but it's certainly something that you can have a look at in terms of ramp grades, drainage, other challenges that you may be concerned about, noise, potential rear ends, and these sorts of things. Kind of dispels a lot of those things which we sort of worried about in theory, but in practice have not played out at all in terms of concerns. The Austroads document, though, is going to be the one, and I must admit I'm sort of not fully read through that. I had a quick skim just to check what was in there, and I've got to sit down because it was only released last week.
Ken, Marie's also shared that there's a webinar planned in March on the latest Austroads report on the raised safety platforms. So she's just shared that with everyone in the group as well. Just a quick question on the previous intersection. Was the side road managed to protect pedestrians? This one.
The side road does have pedestrian crossings, but it wasn't raised or anything. So this one, I suppose, is going to perform really well from vehicle to vehicle crash perspective, which was and is the dominant source of trauma in this area. The pedestrians and cyclists still have a bit of a challenge through there, and I think there could have been more done in that space. But the signalising certainly helps on the likelihood. So pedestrians having their own phases to walk, but yeah, a bit of a challenge from some of those other perspectives. Anything else, Kathy?
No, that's all. Thank you.
How are we going on time? Okay. 45. So another one here, which we won't do as an exercise, but sort of similar challenge, but very different road environment. High speed, 100 km/h road. The arterial road sort of goes around the corner here. This is some big telecommunications exchange building and the like, and property boundaries up to the side. You know, a high risk intersection does have a crash history, but that, you know, just having a crash history does not dictate whether something is high risk or not. I mean, it's a pretty good indication that it's high risk if it's got quite a crash history. But just because an area doesn't have a crash history doesn't mean it's not high risk. We know a lot more about road infrastructure and road trauma than waiting for crashes to happen to show us where risk is. There, we've got very sophisticated ways of identifying that. So don't just drive things by crash history. But anyway, this one does have a crash history. Again, the region wanting to try to alter this and thinking, well, we'd like to do a roundabout, and then they say, well, we need the vehicles turning around, and the roundabout's going to be huge, and we're going to need to do something to slow people on approach, so we'll do sort of reverse curves on the approach. And my God, the cost just is starting to blow out. Now we're at $5 million, and oh, we can't even move this, and that's going to cost us $1 million alone to move, and the money just becomes impossible. So the region then starts looking at, okay, well, maybe we'll do a right turn lane here, and we'll do some advanced warning signs, and we'll do some curbing around there, and okay, we'll do a variable speed, a REORS style thing, so it'll go down to 80 kilometers an hour. And all these things are improving reducing the likelihood of the crashes, but we're still in that territory of death and serious injury when things happen. And it's the speeds are still high, even when we put the REORS in. We reduce the likelihood and the severity a bit, but we're still left with a really big residual risk there. And this is one where they went a bit more innovative in what they could do and started to say, well, are some of these smaller roundabouts acceptable? We can go quite small with the roundabout, and you can see the inner radius, that's the actual roundabout. The rest of it's a concrete apron. And so we've got a very, very small roundabout, concrete apron, and straight approaches. Now, some jurisdictions are okay with straight approaches. Some jurisdictions always want reverse curves, which are basically chicanes on the approach into a roundabout to slow you down on the approach. People were worried about the speeds of approach. So, again, some raised platforms on the approaches. Pretty rural area, isn't it? I can send you the full detailed design set on this one if you're interested. I can probably dig that out. And again, we're getting better and better guidance on compact roundabouts, and we've been doing a lot of work in trying to drill into not only where you would elect to use these, but how you make some calls on different aspects to it. But this one was built, and to slow people down. It's got a fairly shallow raised platform. It's got some raised area here. It's got a very small circulating carriageway and apron. They didn't need to move the thing. They didn't need to acquire much land. It was all done a lot cheaper. And I think some of you have seen this one. And it's just really quite a wonderful, I suppose, example of us pushing for that severity reduction rather than reverting back to what's sort of easy, which would be to just tweak around with the likelihood of the crashes. You can see there the circulating carriageway, very small, just that. And so a large vehicle definitely gets up onto that and sweeps around there. Obviously, lighting is slightly different. You can't put lighting in the middle of this. There's not enough space, and little bits and pieces of changes. But again, this one's performing really, really well. Much lower cost than the full-size roundabout. And I think what we need to be doing is starting to roll these out in a huge way, because every time that you can, you are going to put this massive, expensive roundabout in, if you can do it for sort of half the cost, which these can come out to, means we can do double as many intersections. And we're getting, as far as we can tell from this, the same safety performance, or very close to the same. So some little design challenges on that, but what you'll be seeing coming out is a lot more design guidance on this sort of stuff. Okay, Kathy, with any questions, and then we'll pop the quiz up.
Terrific. So is it thermoplastic lateral road markings on the approach? Do you know?
It is. So the thermoplastic markings, potentially some concerns from motorcycle groups and the like, but it is on a straight, so that's not on on a lean, and yeah, it seems to be performing quite well.
Yep. Do you know the internal diameter of it?
I can't remember off the top of my head. As I say, we've done quite a bit of design guidance work, which I can provide a lot of that over, and I can provide the designs of that. In fact, I'll dig out the detailed design. We'll just send it to everybody.
Yep. Okay, no worries. And did you know the rough cost of it?
It was 3 million. I think the full roundabout was going to cost about 5 million, and this cost about 3 million. But this had so much white collar cost associated with it because it was first, and it had to go through like design committee and reviews and all of this huge amount of work and the like to get it through because it was so unique. But again, I can send the cost. But I dare say once we get these up and running, they'll roll out a lot cheaper.
Yeah. And last question on this one, safety risk on the concrete aprons, just in relation to truck rollover?
Yeah, good question. So there was dynamic truck modelling done with the sort of truck expert people about how this might influence any of that, and definitely was a concern. Also, motorcyclists and motorcyclist clipping that. So you know it's a very clear definition between the pavement and the concrete apron. So that's a good thing from a visual perspective. You know, nothing at this stage has transpired. It's something you definitely want to think about. But yeah, good question.
Okay. Has there been any, I'm not sure when this one went in, Ken, so I'm not sure if there's any data on this, any reduction in crashes?
Yeah, there is, but I would dare say that's somewhat meaningless for one intersection. You don't get statistically significant results in crash reduction on one intersection. We need to build sort of 10, 20 of these and start to get a sample that's somewhat significant. But what you can do is look at the speeds of vehicles on the approach and do conflict analysis. You put your CCTV cameras out there for a couple of weeks, and then you do AI software does your conflict analysis these days, and get some ideas that way. And there was a big evaluation report done on this with a few of those things, but all very positive. But I think we just need to build a lot more of them and get some really meaty data to be able to make any call like that.
Okay, that's all the questions for now. So I'll just pop up the very quick quiz.
Oh, okay. Whoa. True or false? Traffic signals are not safe system. True, false, or unintelligible question? Unintelligible question meaning that doesn't make sense as a question. Unintelligible. I don't like your phrasing of your question. How are we going on time, Kathy? I might have to make a big run at the finish line, won't I?
No, you'll be right.
Do you want to, in the background, open up the assignment? I haven't opened it up.
For sure. All right, we'll go 10 more seconds for that question.
And remember, we don't mark you on this, and we don't even know who answers what. So feel free to just have a guess if you're scratching your head. Maybe if you're scratching your head, unintelligible question is your one to go.
You've mentioned that a few times, Ken. I think you might be giving it away. All right, we'll close that off now.
Okay. Are we sharing the results now? Yeah. Okay, so traffic signals are not safe system. Most of you went true, and some went false, and quite a few went unintelligible question. I put this up intentionally to show that it is not the traffic signals themselves that are not safe system. In fact, oh, where did it go? Did you take it away?
I did. Sorry.
So the commentary around not safe system is not a great way to phrase things anyway. So I would be leaning towards unintelligible question on this one because, pure safe system. So talking about safe system as a binary thing, that is safe system or that is not safe system, is somewhat ridiculous because we know things have alignment with safe system principles. They have good alignment, they have bad alignment. To get something as to pure safe system, I don't even think we would really know what that is. So there is this unintelligible question associated with that. And the second one is that you have no context. Traffic signals can align very well with safe system principles in the right environment and the right situation, and they can align very badly with safe system principles in a different road environment alike. So you haven't been given sort of enough information about the context of this. And then the thing I want to stress is don't focus on the specific infrastructure we're talking about, the signals or the roundabout or the wire rope safety barrier or the clear zone or whatever it is. Bring it back to the principles we're talking about and think about the energy, when the crash happens, what's the energy going to be? What's the likelihood of crashes? Are we reducing the likelihood, the severity? And also remember that it's a system. It's a holistic system we're talking about. And we haven't even then thought about those wider elements of that system. And that's another one that, back to our exercise that we were doing at that intersection, is that I didn't tell you all you can do is infrastructure. But all most people wanted to do was infrastructure, except for somebody who wanted to build a rail line, which I thought was quite out of the box. But we are sort of conditioned, and it's probably because of our background and what we do. We're infrastructure engineers, and a lot of us, and we just want to build our way out of this. And that's going to certainly help a huge amount. But we need to also think about what else can we do from these other elements of the system that interact. And so I would have loved to see some, with your extra money in that, some behavioural change campaigns, some work with the school some maybe advertising of vehicle safety features, and broadly thinking about this holistic system. But anyway, there you go. I put it up there because a lot of misconception around, for some reason, people saying traffic signals are not safe systems. I was like, whoa, no, that is not a correct statement at all. In the context of where we've used them a lot of the time, they have aligned badly with safe system principles. But sometimes they've been used in fantastic ways in the right context, and that aligns very highly with safe system principles. The other one that people say to me is, oh yeah, I know the safe system. It's all about wire rope, lower speed limits, and roundabouts. I go, well, they just all happen to be things that in a lot of situations align quite highly with safe system principles. But no, that's not what the safe system is in its entirety. That's just a few of the outputs of the system from an infrastructure perspective. Okay. Jump in any time, Kathy.
Mike's just said that he likes the idea that we focus on principles, not interventions. However, it can be useful as a way of explaining the investment case that a certain intervention types have a consistent death and serious injury return.
Yeah, the messaging and the packaging of all this is a very big challenge. I think the safe system assessments will help you with that as you start to condition decision makers to be seeing a safe system assessment and expecting a certain graph and wanting to see big reductions in specific areas around that. It'll help to people not be concerned about that. I think there's a really great point in that about how we get more of this stuff out there, and that's I think a really good approach. the thing that always concerns me with that is around, you know, people and organisations not being willing to innovate. And if we get locked into this is the only thing we can do, we sort of condition an organisation into never wanting to innovate. Because no, all we do is roundabouts. That's all we do, because we know that they're. We go, yeah, that agree, and then they're great, and it's easy to get them in. But if we could do that, you know, get the same outcomes from lower cost or easier implementation, that's also a good thing to do. But anyway, big complex organisational change and investment challenges. Okay. Mid-block, I'll move through this pretty quick, so I've got a bit of time to explain this assignment that you've got. But how about this one? You just write down very quickly, without knowing anything about this road, apart from the fact that it's you know, got a barrier line separator, nothing physical in there. It's got a little bit of shoulder. It's obviously got some roadside with trees and the like. It's got the very occasional, very minor intersection. And it goes on for about 300 kilometers like this. What are the dominant crash types on this 100 kilometer per hour, one lane in each direction road? What are the dominant crash types? Just type it in.
What's the AADT, Ken?
It's a very, very astute question there again from Michael. The AADT is 3,900 vehicles a day. Wow. So that's that. Yeah. Wow. Okay, this group certainly knows their stuff in terms of, as soon as I said that number, it just went bang, run off road, run off road, run off road, run off road, run off road. The answers just came flying in. So obviously a lot of you have read your own research there on the AADT that makes it more likely for head-on crashes. So somewhere around the 6,000 from the work done by like Pilgrim and Fabian, and I think was in there, and somebody else. Was it you, Michael? Might have been. I can't remember. But yeah, so the point being that people know it's lane departure, and you know, they're either leaving their lane and hitting trees or rolling over, or if the volumes are higher, they're hitting other vehicles. I mean, there will still be head-on crashes on this, absolutely. There'll be more run-off road crashes. So, you know, isn't that interesting that we don't need to know anything really about this road? We don't need to know, but we just know straight away that there's going to be death and serious injury, and it's going to be people leaving their lane. And they're going to be falling asleep, they're going to be distracted for one reason or another, and we just know it happens. And it's all over the place. Now, what do we do about it becomes the big challenge, doesn't it? So well done to everybody on that. I was not going to give out prizes because I knew you'd all be straight onto it. So these are the kind of roads you're dealing with. This is one of your roads, and we're seeing sort of high volumes and that separation by just that dotted line, and it's a huge challenge. We've got just death and serious injury potential all over the roadside and all over the other side of that painted line. And it's so far from the energies that we can handle as humans. And we are genuinely just relying on the people not making mistakes. And the safe system sort of doesn't align well with that. So we can't have this sort of setup if we've got humans still, you know, in control of the system. When you sort of stand back and you imagine if, like, you know, there were no roads, and and we were, you know, we came up with this idea of roads. my God, we would never design it the way we design it with this way. It's just we have sort of inherited this and it's evolved, and this is the way it's come about. We know the side impact pole test now 32 kilometers an hour, but this one's at 29 kilometers an hour. We know that that's the higher, the highest input of energy to the individual occupant of the vehicles on these side impact crashes. Here's an example of, I suppose, what is predicted at about 60 kilometers per hour. Hopefully this streams through to you. The most violent sort of crashes we see out there on the road network, commonplace into these trees and these power poles. It's incredible the amount of force and that point source there. But we know even when we clear all of those point source hazards out of an area, we still have a residual of risk there. And so the old clear zone theory, which some of you will probably be aware of, but clearing an area of trees and power poles and the like certainly reduces the likelihood of crashes. But what we know is that there's rollover that can still occur, and a lot of vehicles will go well beyond that clear zone. So we know that objects come down as you create clear zones. We know rollover sort of starts to go up. And we know that the runoff road crashes that are casualty crashes sort of reduces and sort of asymptotes out at somewhere around 4 as you create wider and wider clear zones. So we know that people go well beyond these and strike hazards and rollover. So I'm jumping through this quickly. It's in your notes, and I've pointed you at a lot of research around this stuff anyway. So wide clear zones, wide area free of hazards in the roadside is not necessarily a safe place to be. People go well beyond that in their passenger vehicles, they roll over, and they don't have the highest alignment with safe system principles. But they still significantly reduce risk in those first few meters of cleared area, 4 to 5 meters of cleared area. So I wouldn't throw clearing hazards out, but we just know that barriers have taken off so much in terms of their design and their technology that it is now it is more beneficial in terms of safety. It is better to hit a barrier than it is to take your chances in a cleared area, which a lot of people aren't quite comfortable with, but that's what our research and evidence is showing. So these are the sort of old cross sections of major duplication of sort of these high speed, state highway ones and the like that were used to happen. You have cleared areas, you have your line of hazards right outside your calculated clear zone. You have big wide medians. We wouldn't have these things, but that and then a big shoulder. And everything there is sort of reducing the likelihood of crashes, but the severity is just still there. 110 kilometers an hour, and vehicles will hit these. And we know we'd build these, and then just be a continuation of death and serious injury. Less than when it was 1 lane in each direction, but nonetheless still there. And the sort of despair of road authorities spending hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars for a brand new piece of infrastructure that looks very similar to this. And then within months of it opening, a vehicle going straight across and killing a family, or individuals falling asleep and running off into the trees and the like. So we know that the cross sections are changed. I'm going to jump through more evidence to show some of that, and you can read that in your own time. But the new Australia's Guide to Road Design Part 6 has some good stuff in it around thinking differently about roadside environments. And so we've sort of progressed and moved on from this. Jurisdictions are going to need to set their own roadside risk intervention thresholds and the like, which is a whole other exercise in its own right. But at a very simplistic whole level, highest alignment with safe system principles, we know are these continuous barrier systems. So when people leave their lane, they hit a barrier and they run along that barrier. And we sort of see this come down in alignment with safe system principles. And we know things like wide center lines, have some benefit in terms of reducing the likelihood of crashes, but they're not addressing that severity of crash. The volume is a big indicator in how things jump around within there on your best alignment with safe system principles. But we are trying to create these road environments with continuous flexible safety barriers and some slight modifications in different road environments. And there's lots of different cross sections, but no longer really would you want to be grabbing all of that land and building these massive wide cross sections, unless you were trying to, widen into the future, provide that land or something, add another lane in the future. Really continuous barrier systems. And then I'll leave you to debate the widths you want to go and the size of shoulders and the like. Lots of those available, and lots of New Zealand specific ones as well. We need to think about how road users are going to use these and the public's perception on them. Certainly we learned our lessons here in Victoria and had to rip out a huge amount of our barrier systems and replace them further out from the edge line because of the concerns of this sort of stuff happening. This is probably a good example of one where we were blinkered to community outrage because of the science and the evidence. Where really this is not a major road safety issue in the big picture scheme of things, but that's just unacceptable to the community if they break down or they need to do whatever they need to do and they stop and they're in their live traffic lane like that is an unacceptable risk from their perspective, and certainly derailed a lot of projects. So we do need to be aware of how the public's going to perceive these things, how they're going to interact with this, and be more mindful of that. And I say that so you don't overspend your program by a few $100 million as we did in Victoria, because it all had to be ripped out and pushed out, and when there was cuttings and fill batters and things like that, there's a whole lot of money involved. Another thing I just want to point out, and this is again not about the specific product, but about the thinking around it, and I mean I am going to talk about the specific product, but product being a Raptor cushion. A Raptor cushion is basically a point protector that goes around a power pole, and it has a bit of cushioning associated with it, but the way it really helps to influence the severity of crashes is that it rotates on itself as a vehicle strikes it. So I talk about it being like martial arts, where they tell you to deflect the energy of the punch. Not that I have ever done martial arts in my life. However, I did watch The Karate Kid once. And but the idea is that the vehicle hits that, and the way it's shaped is it rolls the vehicle and moves them along from the pole, and so they slow down over this period of time. These are the kind of wonderful little interventions. Say, we're not going to accept the severity of that crash. We can't fit the barrier in place because of this side road or the length and the different requirements. We can't get a barrier in there. So instead of just ignoring this and saying, oh, well, there's nothing we can do about it, people are looking for ways to manage energy. Well, it's wonderful. And this was a forensic investigation of a crash at 93 kilometers an hour or something like that, of an old car, Ford, with 4 male passengers who absolutely floored it around this roundabout, which has some challenges in its own right there. Left the road, hit a power pole with a Raptor cushion, and they all survived. Some minor injuries, but they're all living a healthy life these days. And again, that's to me safe system infrastructure in place. We've had mistake happen, and we're going to work with other elements of the system to try and minimize that. We probably had a bit of a safer scenario in one sense, that anybody else approaching this roundabout had slowed down and looked around. And so the fact that they floored it through there meant that there's more chance that others stopped and avoided this. It happened about 2 in the morning. So I don't think there was actually anybody there. But the infrastructure has helped out in this one. Do we have another quiz, Kathy, or do we just jump into the assignment? or other questions?
No, we don't have any questions. We could jump into the assignment. That's a good idea.
Okay, let's do that, and we might come back and do some other things. But I'm going to stop sharing there, and hopefully you can pop that up. But this is good. So what I've done there is given you a very sort of high-level overview of some of the sort of more drilled down infrastructure perspectives. But what you noticed is a lot of the time I was talking exposure, likelihood, severity. And this is what I want you to do in your assignment, is to analyze areas for things that influence exposure, things that influence likelihood, things that influence severity. And so you can see there, Kathy's gone to Module 2 assignment in Schoology and found that Word document and downloaded the Word document and hopefully opened it up. We're not quite seeing it, Kathy, so you might have to stop sharing and then reopen it at the Word. Oh, there it is. Very good. Okay, so can you expand that, please, a bit and zoom in? So what you've got there is a Word document. And you're going to download the Word document, and it's got instructions in there in case you forget what I'm saying now. So the first thing we want you to do is select an intersection. Now, it could be the intersection out the front of your house. It could be the one just near the office, or one that you saw when you were on holiday, or one that you've driven through and thought, that intersection's dangerous, I don't like it. Or, wow, that's an awesome new intersection. Whatever you want, you're up to you. Now, you're not going to need to go to this intersection. But, you know, you're going to need to look at it through Street View or the like, or if it does happen to be out the front of your house, you can just have a look at it. So you're going to feel like anything that's highlighted yellow will come to that. You're going to inspect your intersection by a Street View or by looking at it. And then you're going to fill out the information on the next page. And so this table is pretty easy. And of course, the columns are exposure, likelihood, and severity. And what we want you to do is put in to these between 1 and 3 factors that influence, increase exposure. Okay, now remember, this is influence exposure in the way we think about a safe system assessment. Okay, and so this is really going to be things that are influencing the number of pedestrians, the number of cyclists, the number of vehicles, passenger vehicles through there. And so it could be the number of legs to that intersection. It could be the desire line of pedestrians is crossing at this point. It could be anything like that. Then we want you to look at the likelihood. Say, what are the features of this intersection that increase the likelihood or influence the likelihood of crashes? So that could be the speed. It could be the visual deceit. It could be that there's a see-through effect at the intersection. It could be that the line marking is confusing. It could be that there is a turning over multiple streams of traffic that's a sort of uncontrolled turn. It could be anything. Now, road safety auditors are just wonderful at this. They just hone in on all these specific characteristics that increase the likelihood of crashes. So between 1 and 3 of those. And the severity, and things that influence the severity of crashes. Again, 1 and 3 of those. And we know now from what we've been talking about, we're talking about the speed, we're talking about the angles of crashes, we're talking about the size of the vehicles coming through, their mass. So, lots of heavy vehicles could be an influence on severity. It could be lots of pedestrians being the ones that are getting struck who are much more vulnerable. So, anything that could influence the severity of the outcome of crashes when they happen. Then we just want you to go through and say one thing that you could change in each of these that would alter that exposure, likelihood, or severity and bring it down. So you'll finish that, you'll jot it in there. If you go up a little bit, Kathy, what we want is your name and then some sort of link to the street view of the intersection that you're talking about, just so when we mark it, we can have a quick look at what you were talking about and just check we sort of agree with that, and maybe make some commentary around anything there. But we're predominantly interested in ensuring that you've got it clear in your mind of what are things that influence exposure, what are things that influence likelihood, and what are things that influence severity. And you're going to upload that to Schoology, and yeah, you're going to actually, that's nice. If you PDF it as well for us, that would be nice, but you can just upload it any way you can. If you have any challenges uploading it to Schoology, you can, as your backup, email it through to Kathy, and Kathy will load it into Schoology on your behalf. But our aim is for you to submit through Schoology, and then we'll mark it. And at the start of next session, we might pick a couple, or see if there's volunteers who want to just talk us through how they looked at the intersection, what they thought any specific characteristics were that influenced exposure, likelihood, or severity. Kathy, when would you like it submitted by? Good question, that's just popped up there. Okay, Monday, December 7, which is that Monday coming up?
Good question. That is Monday coming up. Whoops, jumped into the wrong thing there. Well, yes, Monday, it's probably in there for 5 p.m. our time, which is 7 p.m. New Zealand time. But basically, if you get them in Monday, then Ken can have a look at them before our session on Tuesday. So I might make the time a little bit earlier, because you probably don't want too much of a late night on Monday.
Well, this assignment very much should not take your whole weekend. In fact, our sort of guide is that if you're spending more than about 15 minutes on this, you've overcooked it. And we want this as a very sort of quick desktop exercise. And certainly if you're confused, or you are discovering you're spending a bit of time on this and you're finding it quite difficult, just stop and get in contact with us, and we'll walk you through it. We'll help you. If you're struggling to get your head around this exposure, likelihood, severity stuff, get in contact. We'll provide you more guidance. We can have a one-on-one Zoom chat, or a phone call, or we can email you some stuff. So we're here to help you, and hopefully you won't find it too hard, and it's just looking at something on Street View or the intersection out in front of you. Do your quiz, which is in there as well, and somewhere 10 questions or so. One will be, how many times did Wally appear?
And this is where I'll pop the recording in as well, in the next sort of hour or so. So you'll find the recording for each session basically down the bottom here. It will appear shortly.
Awesome. So any final questions or comments from anybody? Yes, we had the when would you like it submitted. We've answered that. Good. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Again, I just want to say what a wonderful group you are. We love the conversation in the chat, the questions, and the like. It's wonderful to see the interaction and the the enthusiasm by people. So you've got a few minutes before the official end of the session, so you can probably knock off your quiz within the time. And please keep in contact if you've got any questions. But have a look at that assignment and get it in. Have a wonderful weekend, and we look forward to seeing you at our next module. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.